People, welcome to Lavender Live, returning after an 8-month hiatus. We are so excited to be back here though. Just say hi in the chat. I'm going to show the chat on screen so you can see everyone. We've got a lot of folks coming in today. Make some friends. Let us know what is the one thing that you really want to make sure you learn today. We'll try to get to as many questions as we go as well. But yeah, first off as well, there is an incentive to comment and chat and whatnot. We're going to be giving away some swag today to 5 random people who comment on this live. We've also got a couple little bits of trivia later in the live where you can win some even bigger goodies. So, we're going to be doing these Lavender Lives now every single week. Mostly, there's a couple of guests who are a little bit hard to schedule in for that, on Wednesdays at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. So block this slot on your calendar right now for the next year, because we're going to have some really good topics coming up. What's more than that, we're going to be covering a different topic with a different guest and hopefully a different host every week as well. So next week, this time next week, we're going to be bringing Samantha McKenna on, the Lord of Show Me You Know Me, to talk about personalization. I'm going to be hosting that one, but following that, Jen Allen's going to be jumping on with Nate Nasrallah to talk about different templates that you can use in cold emails and emails throughout your sales cycle. The week after that, Morgan J. Ingram's coming on with Will Allred as the host to talk about sequences and cadences. So yeah, keep this spot free in your calendar for sure. However, this week we want to start off with a bang and go broad on cold emails so you can watch this and come away with some really actionable tips, ideally to book some meetings right into April now. So we've brought on someone who I know has got a lot to say on this topic, someone who can turn any life story into a sales lesson, whether that be traveling down to Home Depot or trying to train his dog. So please welcome, we've got Josh Braun here today. There we go, I clicked the button right. Josh, how you doing down in sunny Florida today?
Hey, well, how's it going, man? Thanks for having me on, buddy. I appreciate it. Great intro. You should wake me up every morning and just say that. It'd put me in a great mood.
I was going to do the whole WWE kind of announcer thing, but I just couldn't commit to it, and I knew I'd turn some people off. Josh, we've only got half an hour, but typically with these things, I know people tend to drop off the longer it goes on, whether it be, the DoorDash arriving or their manager slacking them saying, hey, you got to get on a meeting right now. So I'd hate to bury the lead. What is the one thing that you need to make sure we talk about here today when it comes to cold emails?
Can I tell a quick 2-minute story?
Oh, please do.
Okay, some of you may have heard this, but it's the most important thing about cold emailing. Several years ago, I'm in the mall with my wife, did not need anything, walking around killing time. We were going to grab some dinner afterwards. To kill some time, I walked into a Fit to Run store. If the sales associate said, what brings you in today? I'm saying nothing. If she's saying, we've got a special on sneakers, I'm saying, I'm good. If she's saying, can I tell you about these new carbon sneakers? I'm saying, I'm good. She didn't do any of those things. She looked down at my sneakers. She said, are you a runner? I said, yes. She said, what distance? I said, I'm training for my first half marathon. And then she said something rather brilliant. She said, you've probably had a running gait test. And I said, what the heck is that? Moments later, I'm on a treadmill. She freezes the frame, zooms in on my ankles, and says, your ankles are overpronating when you run. I said, yes, so. She goes, the problem is if you run in sneakers that are not made for pronated feet, you can get plantar fasciitis. If you'd like, I could check your sneakers to see if they're made for pronated feet. And a few minutes later, I'm buying sneakers and insoles. The point of the story is no matter what you sell, your prospects are getting the job done in their sneakers. So if you're pitching sneakers, faster, better, cheaper sneakers, you're always going to hear, I'm not interested. In order to get someone's attention and keep it, you have to shine a light on a big, expensive, terrible, no good, very bad thing that happens if they do nothing. We could talk about how to do that, but most of the people that I coach are selling better sneakers.
I absolutely love that. So we call that creating demand. Because if you're selling better, faster sneakers, the only people who care are people who are actually shopping for sneakers. And most people aren't actually looking for sneakers right there. So let's dive into how exactly we can get people interested in our sneakers, our HR software, our sales engagement platform, whatever you may be selling here today. I thought a great place to start off with when it comes to cold emailing, if you write a great message but it never gets seen, what a waste. So I thought the first thing we could cover is how to get those emails opened, and then we can jump into the messaging itself. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds good. So let's actually give some real tangible examples.
Mm-hmm.
So one mechanism for getting opens is to make sure that you don't give everything away in the subject line. So if you ever watch a Netflix series, you know at the last 2 minutes, of any series. I'm watching The Last of Us. Is that what it's called? Last Days of Us? The zombie movie?
Yeah.
The last 2 minutes is it's like crack. You have to watch the next thing. And then second, you want to keep it relatively short. So one of my favorite subject lines of all is to say something like your streaming service bill, right? So your podcast, your post, your bill, your marathon. What about my marathon? What about my bill? Another one of my favorites is what I call the rule of three. It's actually from comedy. Wendy Lieberman's a pretty famous comedian. One of her favorite jokes or most famous jokes is something to the effect of, I just bought a 3-piece bikini. It's a top for me, a bottom for me, and a blindfold for you. So expected trait, unexpected trait. This is how I got Chris Voss to open up my email and ultimately come on my podcast. So I said Abdul, which was a terrorist in his book. That's expected trait, podcast, expected trait, and unexpected trait, my mother-in-law. So it was Abdul plus podcast plus mother-in-law. And he's like, what does my mother-in-law have to do with this podcast and Abdul? And that got the open. So those are my two favorite. Another one that I like is open to this, question mark, heard of this, aware of this, aware of what? So those are gonna get opens. Getting opens is pretty easy. I could, honk a horn really loud and get attention. What we're going to talk about next, I think, is how do we keep attention. So those are some subject line mechanisms that might maybe help some people out.
Absolutely, I love that. I love the three where it's kind of like a riddle because people need to know the payoff for that. I tried that recently actually. Did emails, replies, toothpaste. And the payoff in the email was that the reps were ripping out their hair in frustration because they weren't getting any replies to their email, right? So they'll be like, well, why is this guy talking about toothpaste? What's that got to do with emails and replies, right? But it definitely creates that intrigue. What's great about that right there is that's not only curiosity, but that's also something very important that you just touched on, which was you made someone actually smile and feel something. If you can make someone feel something in your email, you're golden. One of the great examples of this that I often talk about is, imagine for a second that you picked up on your prospect's LinkedIn profile that they're an amateur wine connoisseur, and you're selling a product called Lean Data that routes leads. You might say something to the effect of, unlike being an amateur wine connoisseur, your reps can't smell the buttery aroma of a good inbound lead. They slip through the cracks. And so the subject line could be wine connoisseur, right? And so those are harder to do. This is not like sending a Starbucks card. What Will did very brilliantly is sort of tied in his message to the toupee. So it takes a little creativity there, but very effective. Yeah, definitely. That's very true. And everything you said as well, by the way, the data supports this. Short subject lines, Lavender's the data of some 6 million emails says 1 to 3 words, that's where you're aiming. And the one thing I'll add just before we touch on to now that body of the email to pay off on the open, right? Think about it like this. So as sales reps, a lot of us don't actually get that many emails. Executives, they're getting blown up. Imagine going to your post box every single day and finding 300 letters there. You wouldn't possibly have time to open and read every single letter. So what would you be doing? You'd be looking at the envelopes, trying to figure out which ones are important. And if it has a big old Wendy's logo on it, well, guess what? That's probably going to be trying to sell you some meal deals, some vouchers, right? So you might just chuck that one. That's the danger of having a subject line that's trying too hard, I find. Sometimes when it's like 10x your revenue, that's going to be something trying to sell you something. So that's why you might want to be smart, short, relevant, and build that curiosity, but also not look like a big flashing sign that says delete me, because that's the danger of if you get the subject line wrong, it's going to get deleted. Now, right before we dive into the email itself, because this will kind of tie into that as well, what a lot of people forget is that when you use a 3-word or 2-word or 1-word subject line, the prospect that can actually see the first few lines of the email as well. And that could do the exact same thing and tip them off this is going to be a rubbish email. How do you think about the first thing that you write in your emails, Josh?
Yeah, so a couple of approaches. There's a lot of talk about personalization at scale and relevance, but here's the thing. You need multiple tools in your inbox, in your toolbox rather. If someone has a very rich profile, I know Samantha's going to talk about this tomorrow, you can certainly perhaps reference something on the profile, but the key is it has to relate to what it is that you're actually talking about. I get emails all the time because I have a pretty rich profile. Josh, loved your talk on this. Your post about this was spot on. Anyways, we sell CRMs. It's sort of like the prospect knows you're buttering them up to be able to do something. It doesn't feel genuine. If you're scaling this kind of stuff at a massive level to tick a box because you have to be personalized, people can kind of see through it. It's almost like saying, I noticed you have money. Can you buy my stuff? So what we want to do really is you can also presuppose something to be true without having to actually glean something off of someone's profile, but in a very specific, crispy way. I'll give you an example of a great cold email that I got a few weeks ago that did exactly this. And it used what Chris Voss calls a label. So labels start with this. It looks like, it seems like, it feels like. And what you're doing is you're presupposing something to be true based on your hypothesis. You don't know it's true, you're presupposing it. The interesting thing is, if you're wrong, prospect will correct you because people love correcting. So the first line was, Josh, it looks like you're self-employed in Boca, Florida. I am. The next sentence, because the job of every sentence is to get you to read the next sentence, is this. Now, I see what your take is on this, Will. If you make over 75K a year, which I do, you're probably overpaying taxes even if you have an accountant. So what that's doing brilliantly is it's qualifying me. Yes, I make over 75 grand. Yes, I'm self-employed. Yes, I don't want to overpay taxes, but I have an accountant. That's going to be my objection. And immediately the email says, even if you have an accountant. And then I'm thinking, well, how does this work? What do you mean? And then it gets a little more specific in the third sentence. It involves some tweaks to the tax laws that are only available to solopreneurs that most general accountants aren't aware of. Worth an exchange. So again, it's a perspective on something terrible, no good that would happen to me if I did nothing. And we're sort of labeling and presupposing some context that we can sort of branch off on.
I do love that. I mean, no one likes overpaying on taxes for one, so it's a great problem to solve. But I like the fact they crossed out the objection that I was thinking in my mind, I've already got an accountant, right? I also like the first thing you said. If you're including personalization just to tick a box, then it's not going to resonate. So what you said before, you can go on someone's LinkedIn profile, and if you're personalizing emails, you can see they're a wine connoisseur. But that, without tying it to what you're going to then move on to, is just, it's pointless, right? It can be done by, that's the part that needs a little bit of thinking. So you, in your example before about reps smelling the aroma, just like a sommelier, a wine taster, that was a clever way to weave that in. But you couldn't just be like, hey, Josh, I saw you live in Boca, Florida. Curious if you used a Lavender email tool yet? You know, like that doesn't work. So I feel like you can be personalized, but you can miss the relevance. And that is what I think a lot of the messages I even get as a non-real executive decision maker get so wrong.
Yeah, I think you're right there, man. I think it's if you're scaling it and you're doing it to check a box, and it's the only tool in your toolbox, it's going to come across like you're not caring. Let me read you an example of a personalized email where you can just tell someone cares versus not cares. So not cares would be like this. Josh, saw you liked Will's post on X. What if we were able to triple your reach on TikTok, right? That's someone checking a box on personalization because their boss said, you got to personalize every single emails. Right? So here's someone that actually wrote one that is really personalized, right? So, hey, George, I read your book and I'm a huge fan of you and your work. I recently saw your talk on how to build a company that's not so frenetic and how your company is actually your product. We're working on building a similar company. I know you're crazy busy, so I'm afraid to even ask, but do you ever talk to groups? Right? So that's someone that actually took some time. The thing at the beginning is very specific and it ladders back to what they're trying to build at their company. And there's a little depth to it. There's a little care there. So again, you have that as a tool in your toolbox, but it shouldn't be your only tool. What I'm suggesting here is that you have this other tool of presupposing and labeling, ultimately to get to the potential problem that the prospect might not know they had.
Absolutely. All right, I've got a couple more questions on this real quick. I love that example, and thanks for reading them out because I was going to think, shall I share screen on this? But then I thought, with just me and you, I'd be all over clicking. I want to focus on the conversation. However, I do want to ask the chat. I mentioned we're going to do a couple more giveaways. So 5 people here today who comment are going to get randomly selected for some swag. But we're going to give away 1 year of Lavender Pro as well to the person who can come up with the most creative subject line based on what we just spoke about. Just subject line, there's no context on the follow through, so you might not be able to do one of those puzzles that we just mentioned. But whichever subject line catches our eye the most, we're going to get you some swag and a 1 year of Lavender Pro as well. So please have at it.
Wait, are we eliminating curse words and nudity, or is it everything? It's all holds barred.
Oh, can I say it? I was this close to saying curse word, but we're live across Twitch. You're allowed to swear on Twitch. YouTube might get demonetized. LinkedIn. It's always funny. LinkedIn's like the most mature platform with like probably the older demographic, but you can't swear on LinkedIn. People do not like.
I think
that
you're
one.
also on. You're on Disney Plus too. So.
Oh yeah.
keep it.
Kids, YouTube Kids. That's where we're streaming to right now. Okay, so we've talked about a little bit about personalizing the email and not faking it and making sure. You then said like tying that into a problem is the most important thing to make sure the email is going to be relevant. I want to touch on that because let's say so that's basically highlighting a problem they weren't thinking about and it's generating demand. You're talking to the 95% of the market who might not be currently shopping for sneakers, as we said earlier, right? Once you've highlighted that problem, how do you nail that next part and get them interested in talking to you about it?
Yeah, so let's give another couple of examples. So
Okay.
let's Will, do you have like streaming services like Spotify, Hulu?
I'm
those
a
kind of things?
YouTube Premium subscriber. I don't like ads.
Okay. So imagine for a second that you picked up on some signal that your prospect recently cut the cord. For those of you that might not be familiar with that term, they're no longer subscribed to Comcast, which is a cable company. And you can presuppose that when someone cuts a cord, that they're subscribed to lots of different services. If they have a family, they might be subscribed like Will is to YouTube Premium, which I am as well. But if they have a family that's big like me, I have some kids and a wife. My wife's subscribed to stuff as well. Kids are subscribed to stuff as well. And sometimes what happens is people are subscribed to the same things. So my wife has a YouTube account, Premium. I got one, Spotify account. And I have no idea who has what. And the problem that I might not be aware of is I'm overpaying for subscriptions that I might not even be aware that I have. This is a company called Truebill, which I think they just rebranded their name not too long ago. Right? So we're going to presuppose that if we pick up on a signal that somebody cut the cord, we might say something like that. Looks like you just cut the cord, which suggests you're subscribed to A, B, and C, and D. You know, YouTube Premium, Netflix, Hulu. How do you know you're not overpaying for subscriptions you forgot about? Now, listen to that question for a second. I'm not saying to Will's point, I'm not saying if I could 10x your revenue, would you be interested? I'm asking a question that subconsciously makes the prospect think, I'm not sure. It's almost like a little difficult to answer. It's neutral. Next sentence would be, built an app. It's being used by over 3,000 cord cutters that shows all subscriptions in one place, allows them to cancel the ones they don't want with a click. Want to try it? Worth a conversation? Think this might help? You know, that kind of a beat. But it's literally 4 to 5 sentences, very sort of focused on what you presuppose, some kind of a question, and then what they could do better that they can't do now. And the cost of doing nothing, which is overpaying. I might even say that typically we're seeing they're overpaying $450 a year or $23 every single month on subscriptions they forgot about. Built an app that lets you see all your subscriptions in one place, allows you to cancel with a click, worth a look. And this idea of $26 every single month is the kicker, because we know from prospect theory that the fear of loss is almost, I think, twice or 3 times as big as the gain. So we want to kind of highlight what people stand to lose there. So that's another example.
I really like that. I liked when you first said it, you said over 3,000 people are using this. That's social credibility as well. And the second thing is you didn't go in to tell them how the app works. It's not going like, yeah, it does this, it connects everything, and it's not like trying to explain it or sell it. It's just this is here. Other people are using it to solve that problem. Really
Yes.
big fan of that. The last thing you said though, and you did touch on this, every example you've given me so far most sellers in B2B at least, probably most of the folks on this live right now, chat's getting wild. Love some of the subject lines that have been flying by as well. Can't wait to give someone that year at Lavender Pro. I'm trying to book meetings with these emails. Every example you've given me so far has been, you haven't said, do you want to meet for 30 seconds and chat about this some more. Why is that?
You tell me, Will. I mean, you're in this space too. What's your take? And I'll give you my take on this as well.
Okay, so we mentioned earlier, executives hella busy, getting tons of emails, their calendars are rammed. And I think the reason why I wouldn't want to ask for that too soon is because a lot of emails are going to be asking that. It's gonna make it, you're not going to stand out. And second, asking for 30 minutes with anyone who's above director level is like asking for $500 in cash. So I think it's too much too soon. It's kind of like, I'm trying to think of an analogy, but you're the story guy, Josh. I shouldn't have even tried. But it's asking too much too soon, right? It's like going up to someone, making friends with them, and then saying, "Hey, do you want to come over to my hoce for dinner tomorrow night?" And you've like spent 2 minutes talking to them. Like,
I'm gonna date myself.
I don't know if you're safe. I don't know if you're someone whose house. I don't know where you live. Are you going to lock me up and put you in your basement? Like, it's too much too soon.
I'm gonna date myself here. Do you know a movie called Mean Girls?
I do. Did you not see the meme I posted ahead of this? I photoshopped your head on and my head on Mean Girls meme.
I didn't even see that.
Get in sales reps. We're going to go cold emailing. Oh, okay. Well, you see it afterwards.
Okay.
All right.
So that movie, there's a character in there. Her name is Regina, and she kind of plays the mean girl. But one of the things about Regina, she has a lot of popularity, but she doesn't give people the time of the day. It's almost like she's so not interested in other people. And that makes her more attractive. Now, of course, it's a movie and she's a terrible person, but there is some sort of truth to that. When you are really needy and desperate sounding, you repel people. So the idea here, to Will's point, is sort of lean back a little bit and be like, is this like something looks interesting? Think this might help, not will help? Worth a look? Taking a peek sometime? No rush, end of Q4. No, you're probably busy. Timing's probably off, but worth a look sometime. It's almost like you want to be a little Regina-ish. Even, I know this isn't about cold calling. It's the same thing with cold calling. I had a woman on my podcast a couple weeks ago called Heidi Bryans, and she asked a really great question on our cold call, which is, hey, John, I was on your wine site. I love wine myself, so I was probably on there a little too long. Was in the chat talking to one of your experts. Do you guys collect analytics in your chat or not really? Right? It's again, sort of a laid back sort of CTA at the end to not make you sound so desperate sounding, to be a little bit more Regina.
Yeah, and it's what a buyer will expect from a salesperson. You think you're going to get sold when you start talking to a seller. So when you do the opposite of that and you pull back, you're kind of like, what am I missing here? Hang on.
That's right.
No, I want that. It must be good, all right? I love that you listed off a bunch of interest-based CTAs, by the way. That was awesome. So just to recap, because there's one last thing we want to touch on, and that's going to be about following up if you don't get the email reply, which most of the time you won't, by the way. Even the best emailers are probably getting a less than 50% open rate. We mentioned earlier about personalization and making sure that's relevant to the problem that you then highlight, and then you're going to tell them how other people have solved that problem, and then you're going to say, hey, fancy a look? Do you want me to show over a 2-minute video? Whatever it may be. If you find some personalization that you don't know how to weave into the email, this is a cheeky little way to still use it and stand out and not seem like a robot, and that is using a PS. Don't say PS I love you, but you put a PS under your email signature, and then you can include that little piece of personalization that you thought was really good, that little thing that you spotted, and you can still put that down there, and it could be nothing to do with the email. And we actually found out recently that using just using a PS increases reply rates. And we're going to do one last giveaway. An hour-long coaching session with Will Allred. I don't think he agreed to that, but now he has. For your sales team, if you can tell us the increase in response rate that leaving a PS has on your email. It's one of Will's recent posts, so if you want to race there, do that. Comment your guess, whatever it may be, and tag Lavender, and then we'll choose someone and get your team set up with an hour-long coaching session on cold emailing. All right. While people are doing that though, Josh, our first email didn't get replied to. We're not going to give up. We're going to follow up. Ideally with a couple of other channels as well, because let's be honest, everyone, some people don't like email, some people like LinkedIn, some people like cold calling, but eventually we're going to send a second email. What's your go-to for that?
Yeah, so one of the big mistakes that I see people make is they talk about all the problems they solve in one email. So a triathlon coach, imagine they're sending a cold email. A triathlon coach can potentially solve lots of different issues for people. Running, biking, swimming problems. They can't swim straight. They bonk on the run. Legs get too tired on the bike. Nutrition, they overheat. A mental game, they get too scared, get afraid. And what people will do is they'll mash all this into one email. And the problem is brains can't comprehend so many different ideas in one email. It sort of like tunes everything out. So what I suggest here is to isolate each of those potential ways you can help or each of those problems into a separate email and make one chess move at a time. And the idea here is that one of those problems might not hit as much as another problem. And whatever you sell probably solves lots of problems. Now, how do you know what all those are? You don't guess it. You don't actually write cold emails. You actually find the copy. What I mean by find the copy is if you're writing it yourself, you're doing it wrong. You want to look for things in between quotes. So if you go to the Captivate IQ website and you go to customer stories, or you go to the Gong site, or you go to Lavender site, you're going to see all the terrible things that happened before people switched. And you're going to look for things in quotes, not marketing language. Those customer words is what you can turn into your, for instance, Everwish template. Everwish you didn't have to do, and then paste that stuff in. And you'll notice a bunch of different problems there, and you'll isolate those, and you'll put those into separate emails. Something else that you can do is I really love, I shared some of this on my feed. I don't know if you've written about this, Will, as well, is visual emails. So I sometimes will have bar graphs that are kind of funny. There's a guy called Dimitri. He's a comedian. And his whole bit is he does graphs and he tells jokes. I'm like, that is really interesting. Can I use some of that stuff to like explain how I could potentially help people? And so on a little napkin, very sketchy things is like embedding like little graphics. Yes, some of them will be blocked. Some of them won't. But if you never send any, they'll never get through. So there's always reasons not to do things. So kind of varying it up with images are very powerful. Also, metaphors. Very, very powerful in emails. Instead of saying, slow, you could say, does calculating commissions in spreadsheets feel like you're sipping peanut butter through a straw? That's going to just hit. Now, that's going to hit a little differently than slow, right? So study up on how to use metaphors. You can even use the same problem and use a metaphor in your second email to make it hit a little bit differently.
That's very good. I love analogies. You reminded me a few years ago, 2016. I was traveling. I said to this guy, do you watch football, soccer for Americans? And the guy said, if the World Cup was set in my backyard, I'd close my blinds. And I've never forgotten him or what he said. I only met him that one time, but it stuck with me forever. If you could have that impact on your prospects, even if they're not interested right now, when that problem comes up, either now or at another company, they'll think of you because you told a great metaphor that stuck. Giving a visual does help a lot. And you did say something about deliverability there, watching out for like including images. Typically, if your first email landed in the inbox, and we're going to be doing another week on how to get your emails in the inbox and make sure they don't go to spam. That second email, you can have a way of it a little bit more. You can include links, you can include images, you can include a video follow-up as well, which is something I used to love to do as well. So as long as that first email went in and you're replying to that email, you can be a little bit more creative in your second email with those images as well. Great tips there.
And something else just in closing, you can also get out of the inbox. One of the greatest examples of this is, my friend Dale Dupree. And I'll tell this in 30 seconds or less. I mean, I read about him several years ago. The guy was the #1 copier salesman in Florida, stealing copier business. Talk about something commoditized. As a first touch, he sends in the mail a sponge that looks like a red brick. And it's got a little note on it. And it says, if you've ever wanted to throw a brick at your copier machine, but didn't want to get fired, throw this instead. And he has instructions. Put it in your dominant hand. Throw and call me. I'm Dale Dupree, but my friends call me the copier warrior. And he fights against jammed up copy machines, right? And so you can actually use your email then to say red brick in the subject line that can basically reference the thing that you sent first. So these wouldn't be for all your prospects, but perhaps there's a subset of high value prospects you could lead with a lumpy mail or a letter. That's far less crowded than, to Will's point, the inbox.
Absolutely. Great shout out for Deal Debris there. Josh, we're at time, but this was rich, this was dense. Thank you so much for coming and dropping all that value off. We do actually have Dale coming on to talk about creative outreach in May, I think. We're booking that far out. But Josh, you've absolutely crushed this. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for attending. Be jumping through those comments later because I didn't get a great chance to look at them all, but yeah, that's all. Anything you wanted to say before you go?
That's it, man. Thanks, guys, for being so active in the comments.
Absolutely. All right. Bye.
Okay.